What is up, you guys? Wonderbro here. Today I want to talk about information overload, one of the biggest hindrances of my recovery. If you're anxious and constantly on Google, reading the forums, watching videos, watching this person and that person, and you've got about 10,000 screenshots saved on your devices, and now you're getting really overwhelmed and confused because this information isn't adding up and this information isn't adding up, and maybe this person is right and this person is right. If that sounds like you, watch this video. So, Google. It's great for a lot of things, right? When we need answers, we turn to Google. If you want to know, can a hippopotamus swim? They can't. They actually can't swim. That was interesting. I learned that today. But if you want to know if a hippo can swim, you go to Google. If you want to know what temperature to put that frozen pizza on because you threw the box away, you go to Google, right? But when it comes to anxiety and you go to Google, you're kind of just Why? Why are you Well, you're because there's so much contradicting information, right? It seems contradicting, and that's the point I'm getting to. It seems contradicting. For example, on one website you may read, hey, your best bet with intrusive thoughts is to simply ignore them. And then on another website you may read, never, absolutely never, ever should you ever ignore your intrusive thoughts. So what gives? What's going on?
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And this is when information overload starts to take place. You've got a person taking in all of this information, how to heal, how to heal, how to heal, and it's starting to contradict. They're looking really deep into it, and now they're starting to freak out. They're hearing this person's voice in their head, you should do this, and they're hearing this, not literally. Stop, I didn't mean literally. They're hearing this person's voice in their head, oh, you should do this when it comes to your... They're freaking out. Right? Everything is starting to run together. Everything is contradicting. This is information overload. Okay? So, how do you avoid this? How do you go about making sure that you never enter into this information overload and become confused, scared, and freaked out? Let's talk about it. I'm going to dive into a bit of an example to explain this. So let's say on one website, and not just Google, I don't want to put all the blame on Google here. Let's say in one book you read that, okay, it's best to ignore, like we were talking about earlier, it's best to ignore your intrusive thoughts. And then in another book you read, you should never, absolutely ever, ever, never ignore your intrusive thoughts. What's going on here? Right? What is the deal? Let me explain it. If you say that to a person, hey, you should just ignore your anxiety, ignore your intrusive thoughts, and that person takes that as, okay, ignore it, and they start accepting. They're accepting their intrusive thoughts. Their intrusive thoughts are coming, those feelings of anxiety are coming, and they're just saying to themselves, it's no big deal, just ignore it, and they're living their life, they're getting off the bed, they're getting off the couch, they're facing their fears, they're facing their anxiety, they're no longer fighting against those anxious thoughts and feelings, all while telling themselves, I'm just ignoring it. Well, fine, great. That person's going to make progress and that person is eventually going to heal. But if you tell another person, hey, just ignore your anxiety and your intrusive thoughts, and they take that as, okay, gotcha, I'll just ignore it. Just ignore it. Oh God, please just ignore it. Oh God, I can't just ignore it. I'm having trouble just ignoring it. They're still coming. I'm having trouble ignoring it. I can't just ignore it. They're going to freak out. They're not going to make much progress. They're going to stay on the bed. They're going to stay on the couch. See, it was all a matter of perspective. It was all a matter of how the person took that information. It was not the word ignore that it was at the heart of the problem. It was how that person digested that information. So that book that suggested you ignore it was not wrong, and that book that suggested you don't ignore it was not wrong. Technically, neither of them were right or wrong. It was all about how the person digested that information. See, one person digested it in a way that was in an accepting way. Okay, I'll ignore it. But they were accepting. The thoughts and feelings were coming. They weren't fighting with them. They weren't asking, why are these thoughts and feelings coming? They weren't saying, oh God, please go away, I'm supposed to ignore you. They were just saying, okay, you're here, but I'm not going to pay attention to you. The other person took that information in the total wrong way. Fight against it. Make sure it never comes. Keep those thoughts and feelings at bay. And again, that's why the book that suggested that you ignore it was not wrong, and the books that suggested you didn't ignore it was not wrong either. So that's really the problem. It's not necessarily that the information itself is causing an overload. It's that we as human beings take every bit of information that we take in, and then we compare it to other bits of information that we've taken in, and then we try to find contradictions. We get confused on things like certain wording and terms. That's the root of the problem, and that is what causes information overload, not necessarily the information itself, because there's a lot of good information out there. Granted, some of it is absolute dog. But most of it is pretty good. Anybody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to anxiety healing is going to recommend some form of acceptance, and it's all going to be along the same lines, but people tend to use different terms. So to avoid information overload, you just need to keep that in mind. Stop comparing every sentence that somebody says to a sentence that somebody else says. Stop comparing every little term. I understand why you're doing it. You're doing it because you want to make sure you're doing the right thing to heal. But you have to understand that as long as somebody is talking about acceptance, there's no point in getting caught up on the little terms. At the end of the day, call it ignoring your anxiety or accepting your anxiety. Call it dismissing your intrusive thoughts or accepting your intrusive thoughts. But as long as you're working on your attitude, you can't go wrong. See, at the end of the day, recovery is about that attitude. You're trying to get to that better attitude where you're facing these thoughts and feelings as they come, not allowing them to stop you from living your life, not giving them so much credit. We don't really care what term you want to use. Call it ignoring, call it accepting, call it dismissing, call it accepting. As long as you're working on that attitude, that is what we're going for. So forget about the terms. Use whatever terms you want to use. Doesn't that take a little bit of pressure off of your shoulders to know that it technically doesn't matter what you want to call it, as long as you're working towards that goal of acceptance? Who cares? All right. That's it. That's everything. Who would have thought that overthinkers would need to be told not to overthink anxiety advice? That's crazy, right? Go figure. Thanks for watching, everybody. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you liked today's video. And if you did like today's video, leave a thumbs up. It really does help the channel grow. If you're interested in getting up with me for a little one-on-one coaching, I do reoccurring calls or messaging, whichever you prefer. Just DM me on any of the Vacate Fear social media. We'll talk about it. All right. I love you guys. Again, thanks for watching. And until next time, as always, stay awesome.